Welcome to Ian Cinema, your destination for endless entertainment and unforgettable movie moments. Discover exciting films, inspiring stories, and cinematic journeys across every genre. Whether you love action, drama, thrillers, or timeless favorites, there's always something waiting for you here. Sit back, enjoy the experience, and let Ian Cinema bring the magic of movies to your screen. In this video, we'll dive into the fate of the Furious, the 8th installment in the Fast Furious franchise. We'll summarize the story, explore the plot, and take a closer look at the cast and characters. We'll also discuss the film's production, box office performance, and share some personal reactions. So, let's begin with the story. The film opens in Cuba, where Dom, played by Vin Diesel, and Letty are enjoying their honeymoon. While exploring the city, they come across an unusual car powered by a boat engine. Meanwhile, Dom's cousin Fernando is having his car towed by a man named Raldo. Fernando tries to convince Raldo not to take the car, but Raldo reminds him how much money he owes. Dom steps in to defend his cousin and becomes angry when Raldo talks disrespectfully to Letty. He challenges Raldo to a street race. If Dom wins, he gets Raldo's car, but if Raldo wins, he gets Dom's beloved Impala. Dom modifies Fernando's car with a more powerful engine, and the race begins. The two cars speed through the streets of Havana, with Raldo initially gaining the advantage. Dom eventually pushes his car to the limit, igniting the fuel and sending the vehicle flying through the streets. One of Raldo's men tries to stop Dom by throwing a motorcycle in front of him, but Dom keeps going. The engine catches fire, making the race even more dangerous. Despite the intense heat and rapidly increasing speed, Dom manages to cross the finish line first. He jumps out just before the burning car crashes into the river. As the crowd gathers, Dom and Raldo face each other. Raldo takes the keys to the car and offers them to Dom as a sign of respect. Dom refuses, telling Raldo that his respect is enough. He apologizes to Fernando for the damage to his car and gives him the keys to his Impala, saying it is better suited for him. The crowd cheers as the two men settle their differences. Later, Dom is driving through town when he notices a mysterious woman named Cipher, played by Charlize Theron, working on her car. Dom helps her, but Cipher surprises him by knowing his name. He immediately realizes that something is wrong. Cipher reveals that she wants Dom to work for her. She then shows him something deeply personal on her phone, leaving Dom with no choice but to cooperate. Meanwhile, Hobbs, played by Dwayne Johnson, is giving a motivational speech to a highly trained team of young soccer players. He is trying to encourage them before an important match. An agent named Frank Petty, also known as Mr. Nobody, approaches Hobbs and informs him that an EMP device has been detected in Berlin. The device could potentially shut down the power grids of entire cities. Hobbs agrees to take the mission, but only after watching his daughter score a goal. He later contacts Dom and assembles the team for the operation. Dom, Hobbs, Letty, Tej, Roman, and Ramsey travel to Berlin. They manage to obtain the EMP device, but soon find themselves surrounded by enemies. The team uses a massive wrecking ball to clear a path and escape. Once they reach a safe distance, the group separates. Hobbs rides alongside Dom and thanks him for his help, promising that they will celebrate once the mission is over. But Dom suddenly turns against him. He crashes into Hobbs' vehicle, steals the EMP device, and escapes. Hobbs is arrested and sent to prison, where he is placed in the same facility as Deckard Shaw. Their cells are directly across from each other, and the two immediately begin exchanging insults and sarcastic remarks. Before being taken to his cell, Hobbs meets Mr. Nobody and his new partner, Eric Reisner, who later earns the nickname Little Nobody. Mr. Nobody explains that he wants Hobbs and Shaw to work together, but Hobbs does not trust him. When Little Nobody mentions Hobbs' daughter, Hobbs grabs him and pushes him against the wall until Mr. Nobody intervenes and calms him down. Meanwhile, the rest of the crew is hiding out at a safe location, still struggling to understand why Dom betrayed them. When Ramsey questions whether they can still trust Dom, Letty defends him and reminds everyone that Dom saved her life. Eventually, Hobbs and Shaw are given an opportunity to escape. Shaw uses a guard to help break out of his cell and frees the other prisoners. Hobbs and Shaw fight their way through the facility before being picked up by Mr. Nobody. They reunite with the rest of the crew at Mr. Nobody's headquarters, where they are briefed about Cipher. Shaw already knows her because she previously manipulated his brother, Owen, and was involved in the theft of the God's Eye surveillance system. Since Dom has disrupted several of Cipher's plans in the past, it makes sense that she would target him directly. The team identifies one of Cipher's main henchmen, Connor Rhodes, and decides to use the God's Eye to locate Dom. However, when Ramsey activates the system, they receive signals from locations all around the world. After eliminating the least likely possibilities, they discover that the final signal is coming from the very building where they are standing. Suddenly, an explosion knocks everyone to the ground. Dom and Cipher enter the facility and steal the God's Eye before escaping. As they leave, Letty confronts Dom and asks whether he is really willing to turn his back on his family. Dom remains silent. Cipher then walks over and kisses him in front of Letty. Dom later asks Cipher why she kissed him. She explains that everything comes down to the choices people make, and Dom chose not to turn against her. The truth behind Dom's actions is eventually revealed. Cipher is holding Dom's former lover, Elena, and their young son captive. Dom never knew he had a son. Elena introduces the boy as Marcos, explaining that it is his middle name and that she had hoped Dom would be the one to choose his first name. Cipher later gives Dom a gun and tells him that he has the choice to shoot her, but she warns him that they are being watched and that pulling the trigger would result in her killing Dom, Elena, and their son, with no other choice. Dom hands the weapon back to Cipher. Cipher's next mission sends Dom to New York to retrieve a nuclear football containing launch codes from a Russian ambassador. Before leaving, Dom makes a brief stop and secretly contacts Magdalene Shaw, the mother of Owen and Descartes. Despite everything Dom has done to her sons, he approaches her as a fellow parent and asks for her help. Dom manages to return to his vehicle before Cipher realizes what he has done. The crew then pursues Dom through New York. Cipher and her men begin taking control of vehicles throughout the city, turning ordinary cars into dangerous weapons and creating chaos across the streets. The chaos escalates as Cipher takes control of numerous vehicles, forcing them to drive themselves and crash into other cars. She even makes vehicles drive out of a high-rise parking garage, sending them crashing to the ground and throwing the streets into complete panic. Dom then confronts the ambassadors and demands the football, threatening to blow up the limousine unless they hand it over. They eventually surrender it. The crew catches up with Dom and attempts to stop him, but Dom manages to fight them off and escape. During the confrontation, he appears to shoot the card Shaw. Letty refuses to give up on Dom. She goes after him and tries to remind him that he still loves her. She grabs the briefcase and attempts to escape, but Dom hesitates to follow her. Hobbs catches up and nearly shoots Letty, but Dom raises his weapon at Hobbs. Letty drops the briefcase, allowing Dom and Hobbs to escape. When they return to the hideout, Cipher is furious that Dom almost allowed Letty to get away. Meanwhile, Elena is tied up with tape over her mouth, helplessly watching as Cipher brutally executes Elena in cold blood. Elena begins to cry as she realizes how dangerous the situation has become. For the final mission, Cipher sends Dom to Iceland to take control of a massive nuclear submarine. The crew heads there with weapons and support provided by Mr. Nobody and Little Nobody. Dom uses an EMP to disable the people pursuing him before making his way to the submarine so Cipher can hack into it. Meanwhile, the plane Cipher is traveling on has secretly been hijacked by Descartes and Owen Shaw. A flashback reveals what happened after Dom appeared to shoot Descartes. Dom had received help from Mr. Nobody to keep a low profile after faking Descartes' death. Descartes was later rescued by Leo and Santos before being revived and brought back into the plan. The Shaw brothers work together to take down Cipher's men while Dom safely recovers Marcus. At this point, Dom realizes he has no reason to continue working for Cipher. Hobbs is ready to fight Dom, but Dom steps forward and challenges him. Dom eventually defeats Hobbs and makes it clear that he is going after Cipher. Cipher takes control of the submarine and sends her henchmen after the crew. Dom arrives just in time to help, crashing into one of the attackers and sending the vehicle into flames. The crew immediately realizes that Dom has returned to their side. Roman, driving a Lamborghini, begins sliding toward the freezing water. Tetch manages to rescue him by holding onto the car door and pulling him to safety. Roman then uses the door as a weapon against the villains arriving on snowmobiles before shooting at them. Shortly afterward, he is picked up by Hobbs. Cipher launches torpedoes from the submarine toward the crew. Hobbs jumps out and manages to redirect one of the torpedoes with his bare hands, sending it toward one of the enemy vehicles. Cipher then fires a heat-seeking missile at Dom. Dom deliberately splits away from the crew as the missile follows him. He drives straight toward the submarine, then launches his car over it, causing the missile to strike the submarine instead. The resulting explosion is spectacular. Dom escapes from his burning vehicle, but the blast nearly reaches him. Fortunately, the crew arrives in time and shields him from the flames. Meanwhile, Deckard finds Cipher on her plane. Once Cipher discovers that her submarine has been destroyed, she jumps from the aircraft using a parachute. Deckard remains behind to rescue Marcus after he falls from the plane. With the mission finally over, Dom and Letty reunite and share an emotional kiss. The crew returns home, once again united as a family. Mr. Nobody later tells Hobbs that Cipher is still on the run and that Deckard has reportedly been spotted in Athens. He and Little Nobody offer Hobbs his job back, but Hobbs decides that he wants to take a break and spend more time with his daughter. Deckard then arrives and brings Marcus to Dom. The two men now have a new respect for each other. With everyone gathered around the dinner table, Dom introduces his son by his official first name, Ryan. He then sits down with the rest of his family, bringing the story to a heartfelt conclusion. Movie review directed by F. Gary Gray. The Fate of the Furious is the 8th installment in one of the most successful movie franchises of all time. By this point, the Fast Furious series had become a global phenomenon, earning billions of dollars worldwide. The previous film had already broken franchise records by earning roughly $1.5 billion globally. There are successful franchises, and then there are the Fast Furious movies. The series found a winning formula built around international locations, enormous action sequences, larger-than-life characters, and, of course, the recurring theme of family. Regardless of how critics feel about the franchise, its popularity is undeniable. These movies had become too successful to disappear anytime soon. However, that does not mean audiences cannot be disappointed when an installment fails to reach the standard established by its predecessors. I personally did not become particularly invested in the franchise until Fast 5. Before that, the series had already gone through several different styles and tones. Fast 5 finally transformed the movies into enormous action adventures that combined outrageous set pieces with emotional conversations about loyalty and makeshift families. That formula continued to work because the franchise kept introducing entertaining new characters, including Dwayne Johnson's Hobbs and Jason Statham's Deckard Shaw. Their larger-than-life personalities added a fresh sense of humor and energy to the series. So why doesn't The Fate of the Furious feel as entertaining as some of the previous installments? That is the central question that remains throughout the film's lengthy runtime. At more than 2 hours, the movie has surprisingly little actual plot. Dom turns against his team after being forced to work for a mysterious cyberterrorist named Cipher. The crew then spends the movie trying to stop him, rescue him, and bring him back to their family. Most of the major characters receive some kind of emotional moment, with Letty doing much of the emotional heavy lifting. Her confusion and love for Dom make her struggle one of the more personal aspects of the story. Jason Statham and Dwayne Johnson also get plenty to do. Their scenes often feel like they belong in a Shane Black-style action comedy, bringing a different tone to the franchise. Their chemistry provides some of the movie's most entertaining moments. Unfortunately, the writing often feels thin. The story jumps from one international location to another, seemingly designed more for a global spectacle than for meaningful storytelling. It can sometimes feel as though the writers simply created a list of exotic locations and then built action sequences around them. The franchise's obsession with the idea of family has also become something of a running joke. The word is repeated constantly, sometimes almost as a substitute for stronger plot development. Whenever the story needs to connect one huge action sequence to another, the concept of family is often brought back into the conversation. Of course, fans of the franchise could argue that the plot has never been the main attraction. These movies are primarily about spectacular action, ridiculous stunts, and entertainment, and there are moments when the Fate of the Furious absolutely delivers on that promise. One of the standout sequences involves Cipher remotely hijacking self-driving cars throughout New York City, turning ordinary vehicles into dangerous weapons and creating complete chaos on the streets. The climactic action and rush also reaches an almost unbelievable level, with the characters battling across an enormous frozen landscape. At its best, The Fate of the Furious embraces the absurdity that has defined the later entries in the franchise. The action is enormous, the characters are larger than life, and the stunts often seem to completely ignore the laws of physics. The problem is that the movie sometimes feels like it is chasing spectacle without providing enough emotional or narrative substance underneath it. The franchise had already perfected its combination of action, humor, and family. This installment simply does not always capture that same balance. Ultimately, The Fate of the Furious is still an enjoyable Hollywood blockbuster, especially if you watch it for the action and entertainment. However, compared with the strongest entries in the series, it feels less focused and less memorable. The movie proves that the Fast Furious franchise can still deliver massive action and unbelievable spectacle, but it also shows that even one of Hollywood's biggest franchises can struggle when the spectacle becomes more important than the story. The Fate of the Furious gives viewers exactly what they expect from a Fast Furious movie: a goofy, playful, over-the-top spectacle that makes you feel like you got your money's worth. Unfortunately, it's everything surrounding the action that starts to become frustrating. The weak material connecting the action sequences is most noticeable whenever Cipher, played by Charlize Theron, is on screen. The Fate of the Furious will likely be remembered as one of the biggest examples of wasted talent in a blockbuster film, especially considering what Theron had already shown in Mad Max: Fury Road. Writer Chris Morgan gives her surprisingly little to work with. Instead of allowing her to participate in a memorable action sequence, she spends most of the movie sitting aboard a high-tech aircraft, giving orders to people on the ground. How do you bring in the Imperator Furiosa of Mad Max: Fury Road and not let her go head-to-head with Dom Toretto? Cipher does have one interesting sequence early in the movie, when she and Dom successfully outmaneuver the team. Unfortunately, that only makes the rest of her role feel even more disappointing because of what she could have been. There is very little emotional depth to Cipher. She has no real warmth, sexuality, passion, or visible motivation. We never fully understand why she is doing what she does, and you can almost see Theron becoming bored with the material. The franchise has always had a strange relationship with its villains, particularly because so many of them eventually become heroes. But Cipher feels like one of the biggest missed opportunities, not only because of the character herself, but also because Theron is forced to deliver so much unnecessary exposition. It's tempting to blame the movie's shortcomings on the loss of a previous creative team or the new director, but that wouldn't be entirely fair. The action sequences are generally well executed. The surprising part is how dull everything else can feel, especially considering what director F. Gary Gray has delivered in the past. It sometimes feels as though he was hired primarily to handle the spectacle rather than to strengthen the story. The visual work is still impressive, and that is something audiences have come to expect from this franchise. I suspect the series could continue successfully for several more films, But if it wants to reach the entertainment level of its best installments, it needs someone behind the wheel who can make the narrative valleys between the spectacular action sequences more memorable. The filmmakers need stronger dialogue, a director who can add more visual flair when the cars aren't exploding, and increasingly important supporting characters who actually have something meaningful to do. Of course, none of this is likely to stop the Fate of the Furious from becoming another box office success. At this point, the destination is practically predetermined. The real question is whether the journey is executed well enough to make getting there worthwhile. Few film franchises have changed genres as dramatically as Fast Furious has over the course of 16 years. What began as a relatively simple street racing movie has transformed into an international action spectacle. Imagine if Harry Potter had started at Hogwarts and eventually turned into a street racing rebel before ending up battling aliens with advanced technology. It sounds impossible, yet the Fast Furious series has somehow made its own evolution work. The movies succeed partly because of how quickly they change, the speed, the increasingly outrageous stunts, and the enormous amount of spectacle delivered in every installment all work in their favor. Who has time to question the logic when Vin Diesel is launching himself thousands of feet into the air to save Michelle Rodriguez from a crashing tank? Or when Dwayne Johnson is using his unbelievable strength to stop a massive vehicle? Eventually, there will come a point when sheer spectacle is no longer enough for audiences, but the Fate of the Furious is not that point. As the 8th film in the series, it's remarkable that the filmmakers have managed to keep escalating the insanity without completely losing the audience. Like the previous installments, this movie is essentially an exercise in increasing momentum. Each sequence is louder, more explosive, and more ridiculous than the one before it. The film begins relatively modestly with a callback to the franchise's street racing origins. But by the end of the opening sequence, Dom Toretto is driving backward through the streets of Havana while his car is engulfed in flames. At this point, that kind of insanity has become a trademark of the series. As the set pieces grow larger, however, the mental gymnastics required to connect the characters and plot to the action become increasingly difficult. Why exactly does Cipher need to control hundreds of cars across New York, sending vehicles flying out of multi-story parking structures just to stop a single armored limousine? How does Dom manage to outsmart the world's most elusive cybercriminal when no government agency has been able to track her down? And how exactly does Hobbs escape a moving vehicle and stop a torpedo with his bare hands? The answer is simple: this is a Fast Furious movie. Logic is not really the priority. What matters is that the action is exciting. And despite how loud and ridiculous the movies have become, many of the action sequences genuinely deliver. There's a brutal prison fight, an enormous and chaotic New York car chase, and a spectacular sequence in which Dom essentially plays chicken with a nuclear submarine on a frozen landscape. Director F. Gary Gray keeps the action relatively clear, even if the movie occasionally relies too heavily on rapid cuts during its fight scenes. Then, of course, there are all the things that happen between the explosions, sometimes referred to as the plot. As the trailer reveals, Dom, who has spent much of the franchise talking about the importance of family, suddenly turns against his team and sides with a mysterious hacker Cipher. To the film's credit, the explanation for Dom's betrayal isn't dragged out for too long. The reason is revealed fairly early, allowing the movie to return to the emotional themes the franchise has always relied upon. The Fast Furious films have always had the qualities of a soap opera, and the Fate of the Furious doesn't try to hide that. Thankfully, the undeniable charisma of the cast and the excitement of the cars are enough to gloss over many of the narrative problems. The extended family of Jason Statham, Dwayne Johnson, Michelle Rodriguez, Tyrese Gibson, Ludacris, and Natalie Emanuel remains entertaining. Their characters may not have the deepest material, but they were appealing and charismatic enough to make the scenes between the major action sequences enjoyable. The chemistry between Johnson and Statham is especially entertaining. I never expected two enormous, bald, hypermuscular men aggressively arguing with each other to become one of the movie's funniest combinations. At this point, all I want is a spin-off where The Rock and Jason Statham walk around in slow motion while constantly arguing over which of them would win in a fight. Ultimately, The Fate of the Furious delivers exactly what it promises and arguably even more. It's fun, funny, thrilling, and, eventually, exhausting. Watching it can feel like standing too close to a racetrack. Your ears will ring, your brain may need a break, but you can't deny what an exciting spectacle you've just witnessed. The Fate of the Furious is about as ridiculously entertaining as you might expect. Surprisingly, it may even be better than its trailers suggested. Few movies in any franchise have the right to be this much fun, but The Fate of the Furious somehow manages to pull it off, and at the center of it all is a simple but bizarre premise. Dom Toretto betrays his team, or, as he would call them, his familia, for mysterious reasons, joining the brilliant hacker Cipher and setting the entire crew on a collision course with him. The Fate of the Furious takes the franchise's over-the-top action to another level, while giving Dom's sudden betrayal a surprisingly human motivation. Why would Dom turn against his own family and work with Cipher to help carry out her dangerous plan? I won't spoil that reveal, but the reason is compelling enough to add some emotional weight to the story. With Dom now working for Cipher, Letty, Roman, Tej, Ramsey, and DSS agent Luke Hobbs are recruited by Mr. Nobody to track down Dom and Cipher and clear their own names. They have little choice but to join the mission. Along the way, they receive an unexpected ally in Shaw, the former villain from Furious 7. Considering his history with the team, his presence creates plenty of tension and some of the movie's funniest moments. The story takes the team across several locations, including New York City and Russia, while the opening street race in Havana gives the franchise's usual car culture a fresh setting. One of the movie's wildest sequences takes place in Manhattan, where Cipher remotely hacks into cars equipped with autonomous driving technology and turns them into a massive weaponized army. Hundreds of vehicles suddenly move under her control, creating total chaos across the city. The team then launches an elaborate multi-stage plan to stop Dom. The movie makes no attempt to keep its action grounded, and some of the physics-defying stunts are so extreme that they become entertaining simply because of how ridiculous they are. The final stretch, involving a massive chase across the frozen landscape of Russia in a nuclear submarine, pushes the franchise's spectacle to an almost unbelievable level. If you ever wanted to see cars, supercars, and a submarine collide in the same action sequence, this is certainly the movie for you. The hand-to-hand combat is equally exaggerated. Jason Statham gets several standout action moments, especially during his fights with waves of heavily armed enemies. His chemistry with Dwayne Johnson also becomes one of the movie's highlights. Their characters constantly trade insults, and their verbal sparring is often just as entertaining as the physical action. Director F. Gary Gray treats the movie almost like a professional wrestling storyline, with betrayals, rivalries, alliances, and redemption arcs constantly shifting the relationships between the characters. This approach also creates opportunities to refresh the team for future installments. Among the newer additions, Charlize Theron stands out as Cipher. She brings exactly the right amount of intelligence, confidence, and menace to the role. Cipher is essentially a high-tech supervillain who operates from a private jet, commands an endless supply of henchmen, and threatens governments around the world. Theron deliberately underplays the character, making Cipher's calm personality and willingness to kill even more disturbing. One of the film's biggest missed opportunities is that we never get to see Cipher behind the wheel in a proper showdown with the franchise's heroes. Theron had already demonstrated her driving and action abilities in films such as The Italian Job and Mad Max: Fury Road, so a major vehicular confrontation would have been a welcome addition. Helen Mirren also makes a brief but memorable appearance. Her role is relatively small, and revealing too much would spoil the fun, but her presence adds another entertaining connection to the series and leaves the door open for a larger role in a future sequel. Scott Eastwood joins the cast as Little Nobody, a younger government agent working under Mr. Nobody. While he brings some energy to the role, the character does not always fit naturally into the established group, and some of the jokes built around him fail to land. By this point, the Fast and the Furious franchise has essentially transformed into a superhero series with cars. The question is no longer whether the movies will become more ridiculous, but how much further they can possibly go. If the team can eventually travel into space, at this stage, audiences probably would not be surprised. Despite all the insanity, The Fate of the Furious delivers exactly what its audience expects: huge action sequences, elaborate car stunts, global locations, humor, and plenty of emotional moments. It also lays the groundwork for a new era of the franchise. The resurgence of the Fast and the Furious is one of Hollywood's more unlikely success stories. What began as a relatively simple street racing movie eventually evolved into a massive international action franchise. After the Fast and the Furious, Tokyo Drift seemed to suggest that the series was running out of ideas. Later installments completely reinvented the formula. The tragic death of Paul Walker during the production of Furious 7 undoubtedly changed the franchise and gave audiences another emotional reason to connect with the series. But the continuing success of these films cannot be explained by that tragedy alone. Over the years, the franchise developed its own unique formula, combining cars, explosions, comedy, family drama, and increasingly outrageous action. The Fate of the Furious, also known as Fast 8 or simply F8, pushes the series further into the territory of high-stakes cyber-thriller action. Cipher's hacking abilities sometimes approach technological fantasy, but the movie moves at such a rapid pace that there is barely enough time to question the logic behind it. The story begins with Dom living a peaceful life in Cuba with Letty. For once, everything seems to be going well, and the two even discuss starting a family. Then Cipher appears and forces Dom to work for her by exploiting a secret from his past. She sends him on a mission to steal powerful weapons and technology that could ultimately threaten the entire world. Standing against Dom are his old friends and teammates, including Letty, Roman, Tej, Ramsey, and Hobbs. Deckard Shaw also returns, transforming from a major enemy into an unlikely anti-hero. His inclusion is one of the movie's smartest decisions. Statham brings plenty of attitude, sharp one-liners, and impressive combat skills, helping break up some of the film's more exhausting car sequences. One particularly entertaining sequence has Shaw fighting his way through a plane filled with enemies, delivering the kind of brutal and stylish action that fans of Statham's previous movies have come to expect. Charlize Theron also seems to have a great deal of fun playing Cipher. Although the character is sometimes written like a classic comic book villain, Theron gives her enough personality and confidence to remain entertaining. Her long speeches about technology, control, and human nature add to the character's larger-than-life presence. The film also features an enjoyable appearance by Helen Mirren, who brings some theatrical charm to her brief role. These smaller character moments provide a welcome break from the relentless action, but the main attraction is still the massive set pieces. There are several major action sequences, including the opening race in Cuba, a chaotic sequence involving cars in New York City, and the spectacular final chase across the frozen Russian landscape. In one of the movie's most memorable scenes, Cipher hacks into countless vehicles and sends them into the streets, turning ordinary cars into remotely controlled weapons. There is certainly a more serious thriller somewhere inside this concept about technology and the future of self-driving vehicles. F8 is not that movie, but it does turn the idea into an effective and spectacular action sequence. Ultimately, the future of the franchise depends on its ability to keep finding new ways to make cars crash into one another while still making the spectacle feel fresh. So far, the series continues to find ways to accomplish exactly that. What helped the franchise survive for so long was not just its action, but also its melodrama, character relationships, humor, and emotional connections. The Fate of the Furious has somewhat less of that emotional depth than some earlier entries, aside from the conflict between Dom and Letty and a few respectful references to the late Paul Walker. As a result, this is primarily a big, loud action movie in the most entertaining sense: fast, furious, ridiculous, and frequently fun, with Charlize Theron playing a supervillain who manages to manipulate Dom. The Fate of the Furious proves that this franchise is nowhere near running out of fuel. If you imagine a hierarchy of action cinema, the series sits somewhere between the wildest B-movies and the polished spectacle of franchises such as Mission Impossible and James Bond. The Fast Furious movies began as simple drag racing films, but over time they transformed into a genre of their own. They combine car culture, explosive action, comedy, melodrama, and just enough heart to make the unbelievable stunts feel like exaggerated expressions of the characters themselves. If this series has taught audiences anything over the years, it is that whenever you think it is finally running out of gas, it somehow installs an even bigger engine. That has never been more obvious than in The Fate of the Furious, one of the franchise's most spectacular entries. It combines everything the series had become known for: high-speed car chases, international espionage, cyber warfare, massive explosions, family drama, and impossible stunts. Most importantly, it proves that the Fast Furious franchise still has plenty of fuel left in the tank. The Fate of the Furious delivers a deadly lesson to the world's superpowers while also functioning as a suspenseful, dysfunctional family drama. The film takes Dominic Toretto, the gruff, fiercely loyal leader played by Vin Diesel, and finds a way to turn him against the people he loves most, including Letty, who has only recently become his wife. At the same time, the movie is packed with a playful collection of action stars, including Dwayne Johnson and Jason Statham, who bring some serious star power to the chaos. You might think combining all these elements would turn The Fate of the Furious into an overcooked, top-heavy stew. At times, the movie certainly feels excessive, occasionally illogical, and perhaps 20 minutes too long. But director F. Gary Gray, who has demonstrated his talent for action with films such as Set It Off and The Italian Job, proves himself to be a skilled blockbuster filmmaker capable of handling the franchise's enormous scale. The Fate of the Furious is essentially pulp entertainment, but it is presented with surprising elegance rather than pure bombast. It is a glossy, escapist action movie that understands exactly what its audience wants. The fact that it was the first film in the series made after the death of Paul Walker, and the first since The Fast and the Furious, Tokyo Drift not to feature him, gives longtime fans another reason to embrace it. The movie opens in Havana, where Dominic and Letty are enjoying their honeymoon. Their peaceful time together is interrupted when Dom agrees to help his cousin Roman during a street race. What follows is one of the movie's most old-school sequences. Dom drives a battered classic car equipped with an unstable engine that can either make the vehicle incredibly fast or cause it to explode. The race becomes one of the film's most memorable set pieces. Havana provides a beautiful backdrop as Dom pushes the car to its limits, even driving in reverse while the engine is engulfed in flames. When the action shifts into slow motion and Dom inches across the finish line, the sequence perfectly captures the outrageous spirit of the franchise. Following this fiery opening, the film introduces its main threat, Cipher, a mysterious and highly intelligent cybercriminal played by Charlize Theron. She approaches Dom and tells him that he is about to work for her and against his own friends. When Dom initially refuses, Cipher shows him something on her phone that completely changes his mind. The movie keeps the reason for Dom's betrayal secret for a while, creating genuine suspense. Whatever Cipher has shown him must be serious enough to make Dom turn against the people closest to him. Cipher is an intimidating yet strangely charismatic villain. Rather than simply wanting money or destruction, she sees herself as someone who can manipulate governments and force powerful nations to answer to her. Her calm confidence and sophisticated control over technology make her a very different kind of threat from the villains the franchise has faced before. Meanwhile, Mr. Nobody, the mysterious government agent, brings Deckard Shaw back into the operation. His plan involves getting Shaw out of prison so he can join the team. This gives Jason Statham another opportunity to steal the spotlight, and his confrontations with Dwayne Johnson provide some of the movie's most entertaining moments. The rest of Dom's crew, including Roman Pierce, Tej Parker, Letty, and the other familiar faces, are pulled into the mission as they try to figure out why Dom has betrayed them. They are also joined by Little Nobody, a new government agent played by Scott Eastwood. Although his character initially feels somewhat generic, he gradually becomes more likable as the story progresses. The movie sometimes feels like standard franchise material, particularly when the team uses the so-called God's Eye, a global surveillance system capable of tracking almost anyone on Earth. The concept feels familiar from modern spy movies, but the fate of the furious never pretends to be realistic. The action sequences, however, are spectacularly staged. They are extravagant, ridiculous, and often completely impossible, but they are also executed with impressive precision and a clear sense of purpose. One standout sequence takes place in New York City, where Cipher remotely hijacks hundreds of vehicles and turns them into weapons. Cars crash through streets, drive themselves out of parking garages, and create massive piles of destruction. The sequence feels like the filmmakers simply decided that nothing was off-limits and then went even further. The movie also gives Vin Diesel plenty of opportunities to demonstrate why he has become such an enduring action star. His appeal is not just about delivering tough dialogue or performing physical stunts. He conveys a powerful sense of determination and the will to survive, win, and keep moving forward no matter how impossible the situation becomes. The film eventually reaches its explosive climax at a military outpost in the frozen Russian wilderness. Vehicles race across glaciers while explosions erupt around them. The scale becomes even more ridiculous when a nuclear submarine smashes through the ice, creating an enormous obstacle that Dom must somehow overcome in a split-second driving maneuver. By this point, the fate of the Furious has fully embraced its identity as an extravagant action spectacle. It is difficult to take everything seriously, but that has always been part of the franchise's appeal. There is also an interesting emotional question at the heart of the story. Dom has been transformed from the dependable leader of his family into someone who appears to be betraying everyone he loves. The movie eventually explains his actions, giving the character a personal motivation behind what initially seems like an unforgivable betrayal. Universal's Fast Furious franchise had, by this point, become one of Hollywood's most consistently entertaining action series. In many ways, the movies are almost review-proof. They are so exaggerated, self-aware, and knowingly ridiculous that taking every plot hole or impossible stunt seriously misses the point. Once you accept the franchise on its own terms, its successes become part of the fun. The series has also developed an impressively diverse ensemble cast, featuring performers such as Vin Diesel, Michelle Rodriguez, Dwayne Johnson, Kurt Russell, Luke Evans, Jason Statham, and many others. The cast has evolved considerably over 8 films, transforming the series into one of Hollywood's biggest and most diverse action ensembles. The filmmakers clearly understand how much audiences enjoy watching these characters interact, which is why the best approach is often to sit back and enjoy the ride. There is a plot underneath all the chaos, but it ultimately boils down to a high-speed chase. Cipher sends Dom on a series of increasingly dangerous missions, while his old team races to stop him and uncover the truth behind his betrayal. As far as action spectacles are concerned, the movie is undeniably impressive. Anyone who enjoyed the previous Furious films, particularly the most recent entries, will feel right at home. Among the standout moments are the massive New York sequence involving remotely controlled cars and the spectacular confrontation involving a nuclear submarine. Both sequences push the franchise's obsession with bigger, faster, and more outrageous action to another level. The fate of the Furious is not perfect. Some returning characters are pushed aside rather abruptly, and by the end, The movie's enormous cast is largely brought together to celebrate another victory, but that is also part of the series' charm. After 8 films, most franchises would be showing serious signs of fatigue. The Fast Furious series, however, continues to generate an impressive level of commercial success and relentless creative energy. It has become a cultural phenomenon built around family, loyalty, speed, and spectacular action. The Fate of the Furious may not be responsible filmmaking in the traditional sense, but breaking the speed limit has never looked this entertaining. They should properly be meaning that one of their friend is D on a similar J stamp to SH is brought a little too gleefully into Tom's familia, given that just 2 films earlier he called murder one of the team. That is ultimately the one core problem of the Fast and the Foolish franchise. It's only work if you stay in the moment and refuse to think about the plot too much. It is a confession, and once you make the mistake of cutting the surface, it has it see fall apart in the end. The film simply feels like a party with a bunch of friends she have not caught up with for a couple of years. The Embley turns with plenty of my character highlights and showcases. There is plenty of humor. There is a repeated discussion of family taken to a delayed level. Fast self-pride things explode, cars drive faster. When Diesel grows with a serious named John wins the film with Mima and Krishna J get to start in his own tribute to John Woo's hard-boiled. This is deep, rich, is stupid, loud, funny. Chaos and all. Thea bet are for a troll on Fast and the Furious, and the Fate of the Furious is of course to enjoy a massive up weekend take home that may reach $400 million or higher at the global box office. Already the series has had its fair share of movies hit it big at the box office, which like Low Kong, Skull Island and Beauty and the Beast, all making an impact both critically and financially. Now as 2017 a bar toward the summer season, the next film set to truly kicks that off in a universal and clearly largest installment is the now 16 years long Fast and Furious franchise, directed by Fawji. The Fast and the Fish changes the dynamic of previous 7 films is only a notable way, with Vin Diesel strongly betraying his family to join up with the Charlize Theron villain as cyberterrorist. Cipher be immensely by Dom Pedro Hobbs. Damon The Rock John personally heads up the effort to take Tom in and force him to atone for his sins is what looks to be some of the biggest and fast action sequence in the franchise history, or look like that the Fate of the Vi might live up to the promise at the box office. Deadline is currently projecting that the film will open somewhere between $375 and $440 million via the box office this weekend, possibly racing up the $397 million that is PR Faust 7A scored when it opened back in April of 2015. If it has managed to live up to or exceed the $400 million window to theta, the Fate of the Furious will also the universe's second biggest global box office opener of all time, just behind the $525 million that Jurassic Park scored in 2015. It's important to note that really the Fight of the Fish is coming at a time when it feels like the franchise has never been more popular. There are a number of factors that could result in the 8th installment performing lower than its procedures if the box office in the long run. The first and fest baying of the absence of the late Paul Walker stand of an FS was one of the film's biggest draws for both richer fans and a casual movie. CS everywhere. It will be interesting then to see how Walker absence may or may not affect the overall office totals of the Fate of the Furious moving forward. It's also important to note that the response to the film have been somewhat mixed so far, with the film not getting as much a universal PR as its some of the franchisee most recent outings like 2015 F7 or a 2011 Fast 5. There's no telling of course if that will actually affect the big box of his success of the Fate of the Furious or not, but it throws an interesting variable into the mix, especially since the Fate of the Fast is just the last stop before 2017 kicks it into high gear with its official summer season for the next several months. The Fate of Furious has now become just the 6th movie movie to earn over $1 billion outside of North America, joining a Jurassic v 1.01 billion, Star Wars The Force Awakens 1.1347 1.16, Titanic 1.52 and Avatar 2.2, with a worldwide total of over 1.22 billion worldwide. It may soon pass Beauty and the Beast 1.23 and counting as the year's biggest global cross-reboot amount. Not the Bee and the Beast for Walt Disney's Emma Boston Dance Street Lux. A musical romance has become the aate movie in history to earn more than $500 million in North America alone, maintaining a potentially any lead give year. Take the last jate for the year. So domestic crown, so yeah, there isn't much out. There's the realistically top The Beauty and the Beast in North America until Star 8 and Eunice Transformers 5 Dispensable Me 3 and our Spider-Man Homecoming Guts, all of which are sat $750 million. Fate of the Furious and the Beauty and the Beast are going to be the biggest movies of the year until at least mid-November if not late December. What ending, at least to me, is the extreme that these two 2017 blockbuster represent in terms of how money. Simply put, Beauty and the Beast made a ton of money in North America and rock solid overseas figure. Meanwhile, Fate of the Furious did pretty well in North America, but it is to end up at the 5th biggest overseas gross rover. Obviously money money, so there is not right or wrong a market to take large chunks off your successful overall worldwide total. Yay, so the studios get loss of the total ticket sale in China anywhere from 50 to around 45% depending on the deal, but there are smaller marketing cost. Also well, but it is worth nothing is one of the reasons Walt Disney has been on such a roll of late, and because they make movies that go nuts in North America. 13 of the top 26 biggest crowding a domestic earner came from just within the last 5 years, with obvious inflation, a 3D bump related cavardos, and 9 of these domestic mega hits. The 4 icon of the Avengers rough 1 Beauty and the Beast, Finding Dory, Avengers Asia, El Iron Man 3, Captain America Civil War and Frozen came from BA Disney. Beyond that, it's just 2 Hunger Games movies, Lionsgate chasing v Universal and The Dark Knight Rises Warner BC will about the constant drive to maximize overseas crosses, but Disney tends to release movie that don't recruit much of an overseas rescue to make it into the black. Sure, they just drop Pirates of the Caribbean / Revenge, which ICE is scouting on overseas off to Kahani for a declaring domestic number, but that's a more conventional play. Universal also being no SLO here either, as we have Noda had a non-universal release over $1 billion since Paramount Bong IC Transformers Age of Extinction in June of 2014, and that bring us to Fate of the Furious and loaning franchises. D8 to a best case scenario for any studio, sure G to earn an options 81% of its money outside of North America. Recruit for any Hollywood film, the grossing more than a $434 million Warcraft at 89%, but that's only because the overseas number outrage exploded just before the domestic figure peaked. The franchisee went from a series that was thrilled with $363 million with Fast and Furious to a series that rose steadily to $623 million. Fast 5 in at 2011, $788 million. Fast and Furious 6 in 2013, $8.5 billion. Furious 7 in 2015, and if you are the Furious 7 $353 in North America was something of a domestic flu jam. Statham is the generational cation of the franchisee. Paul Walker's death last rule. Then what do we have got in franchise whose overseas number have gone from $209 million in 2009 to over $1,378 per in 2017 AW. While the domestic gross basically stays between $55 million and $238 million over the last 8 years. Fate of the Furious shows no sign of slowing down. The high-octane aate installment in the Fast and Furious franchise broke box of his record last weekend when it to $532.2 million worldwide. This weekend's swing of low-mat newcomers don't show sign of earning over a tenth of F opening a weekend $100 million domestic earnings the weekend most promising fresh prospect is Unforgettable from Warner Pro. The story of a star's sped by a Catherine B who pathologically torments RH's new mate. That's dark a psychosexual thriller directed by longtime producer but first-time featured Helmer Resign needed to take his about 77 billion from 200 to 300 locations $7 million. The estimated pros are not too shabby off of a $12 million production budget. So the movie is the fate and the furious the promise stated during the Armenian genocide and is centered on a love triangle made up of Oscar Isaac, Charlotte Leon and Christian Bale. Looks to remake $5 million compared to its $19 million production. See the socially conscious flick from Open Road Films on behalf of Survivor Picture has plagued to donate all it proceeds to philanthropy. Its backers area most interested in raising awareness than they were in making money. The film's politics caught the attention of the Turkish Majbo. Similar to that is the city are flocking to leave 1-star review for the movie on IMDb. On the V-Day before the film for release, the promise had a match over FN20. Reviews a combination of haters and a reaction from sporters to read the film highly. Then there's phonics forgotten a sci-fi horror films from Shando Films and the Victoria debut of Justin Bruce centered around a real claim of a UFO sliding in the 90s. The movie show earned more $2 million from 1,500 screen expected. This is born in China as the Panda movie narrated by John Krinsky to get off a fine start about $5 million from 158 locations. And finally Ben Weir British accent comedy Free Fire distributed in the US by A14 to pick up about $3 million. All films added 11:55 a.m. Universal The Fate of the Furious has a short off to record a $33.2 million debut at the international box office, couple that which domestic a $98.7 million launch and the worldwide debut is $532 million. The biggest global opening for a film ever. So move over and Rex and Kalana F8 and 63 towards this weekend. Best debut Jurassic Park's record offshore debut of $316 million and with North America's Star Wars The Force seeking a $529 million worldwide bow. It also pushes Universal part the $1 billion international brawl box office threshold on Friday. Clear number 1 in all the markets where it opened. This frame F8 Duba Statham records it as the biggest opening weekend of all time and 17th atop Universal being 21 and the biggest Fast and Furious franchise star and 32 internationally. The Fat of the Furious in its first weekend top the lifetime total of the Fast and Furious is $62.9 million. Too Fast Too Furious $9 million. The Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift $96 million. Fast and Furious $28 million and Fast 5 $413 million. The bulk of says it comes from China, which was the life this weekend when F7 opened in 2015. It did so without the Middle Kingdom in the first hour. The Cross 3 is a staggering $192 million. That's the biggest 3D star of all time and the number 1 for Hollywood film at aise, the second best opening weekend overall behind only 2016 loser title The Marmota, which had the benefit for 4 days of previous over the New Year period last year. So only if Gary G turned at the wheel of the 16 years old series. The big swing has having China included in the launch of Russia 2 at $14.2 million. F7 open to $258 million without China and Russia, which because of the exchange rate fluctuation is about $218 million. So if you take out China and Russia from the equation, the Fed and the Furious still beats F7 at 2,282 million ahead of the weekend award. Seeing the FA debut in T. Mid $300 million overseas with some GS high also $400 million, but it was always going to hang on the Middle Kingdom. F7 karenge her record as the number 1 import at $3,913 million, and it would be foolish to bet against FDA getting to the Billa Park when the dust settles. Local BIs is strong and there's nothing coming up that looks likely to run it off. Throw apart from China, the top crossing Tyrese including Mexico $17.7 million, UK and Iran to 17.5, Russia 14.2, Germany 13.6, Brazil 12.8, France 9.2, Korea 10.6, India 10.7, and China 9.3 million and $1 billion. Part F, possibly aise. The cars further down the line, sure, and if not it will be closed. These SUVs are always going to be front-loaded, so it's a question of how the multiple comes in. It could range overall from a 2.1x 2.5x with some smaller markets over-indexing to a 3 or even at 5. Local reviews are good on the Century of the franchise that crosses cultural divides and plays to universal audience. There is also a clear play ahead for F8 until Guardian of the Galaxy Volume 2 begins offshore route on April 25. In IMX there's 22.6 in Vin Diesel truck. There was the YS over of the format with a 179 screen and sets a new AA opening record, dropping at F7 20.7 million. Overall it's the fourth biggest opening over 4 IMX internationally. F8 was on 681 IMX screens, 395 in China. They're second only to Universal's Jurassic World, $22 million in China. 14 million gave IMX the second biggest 3-day behind Warcraft to 15.2 million. Arts of Universal Pictures with legendary F8C of the block with a 25% jump on F7 in Middle Kingdom. The local currency elsewhere it is the number 1 IMX opening ever in India, the UE, Belgium, Egypt, Argentina and others. Now let's talk about the full cast and the crew of the movie. The fate of the Fusa. The movie is led by FGR. Rewriting credit goes to Gary Scott Thompson and Chris Morgan. Cast: Vin Diesel as Tom, Jason Statham as Dear, Dan Jensen as Hobbs, Michael Rodriguez as Letty, Tyrese Gibson as Raymond Laws at Person Tristan as Cipher, Celas Ranobody, Nadalomi Asa Ramsey, Luke Ivans Asa Elda Asa and Christopher Hudjo as Rod Scott Eastford as Little Nobody, Patrick Stuspree Sid Jarko, Santiago as Fernando, Luke as Miller, Corey Meyer as Tag Team Leader, Roy California as Russian Minister of Defense, Alexander Proper as Russian Ada, Andrew Roxon as Russian Lead, Roberta Jackson as Russian MMV, Nick Grasra as Russian Soldier, and Ines Durella as Sam, Gary of X as Super Chat Pilot, Matthew Corwell as Super Chat Tech, Jeremy Anderson as Lead Guard, John Ramra as Prison Guard, Togoptron as Leo Damar Asa Santos, Peter Hansen as G-Tech, Friday Camberlin as Zombie Kartek, Sam Hedida as EMP Tech, Mel W. Bromer as Big Mikey, Jordan Bomber as Pink Butterfly, Saucery Player Scott Proctor as Control Tower as Soldier, Todd Cole as Novla Commander, Kayla Canline as Haka Performer, Matifler Haka Performer, Taylor Donaldson Ha Performer as Abdominal Hackery Performer, Inard Wall Hacker Performer, Jackie Grace Edwards Hacker Performer, Rez Edwards Hacker Performer, Selena Ingram Hacker Performer, Kalun Kima Hacker Performer, Catherine Kim Hacker Performer, Jordan Price Hacker Performer, Anna Ursahi, our Performer, Marina Leonard Hackery Performer, Olivia Shaw Hayer Performer, Jamasa Baby Tosestino, Carla Raldo, Alexandra Boss Plymouth Owner, Charlize the Baby Turtle, Lisandra Delato Sexy Racia Starter, Santiago Souls Plymouth Unstock, Joe Carroll DJ Party, Brian Denoa as Lips Little Car Finish Line. Rest of course is here, Dylan Kda Adams Businessman, Rex Alba Bazinas, Monica Sangerman, NYC Coffee Shop, Pedrona Karen Russiana Soldier, Julia Basta Pedestrian, Melissa Rebender, NYC Pariana Anita Farmer, Pond Business Women, Patrick Kin Swap Member, JJ Bat Tourist Ostbaron, Lieutenant Preston Karen Bossler Tourist, Brianna Bowman Buzziness Apparent Tourists, Bankly Mechanic Ron Deparnit Coaris Pedestrian, Amanda Period Pedestrian, Marco Kaka Operative, Tashia Calrin as College Student, Danlia Campbell as Construction Worker, Tony Cage Lassa Hitchman Xu as Fish Warehouse Worker, Laura Messi Klein as Businesswoman, C. Across a Businesswoman, Nathan Chaos and Ike Droichter as Prison Guard Cowboy, Asa Berlin Swarkley Crane as SP. Inshallah military operative Dobby Davis as pedestrian as downtown pedestrian Jamidstra as ultramax convict David Dearson as butterfly apparent Diesel Downlow as buzziness a pedestrian Rick Derman as Naya pedestrian Don as construction worker Ra Ilo as police officer Davida Demon Esper as Ultrax convict Roba Field Rasa businessman Joe Fischel as showroom employee Terry Flowers Asa operative Bill Frost as Berlin Swarta Captain Creasy Glow Asa businesswoman Brian Cree as Kiya messenger Theine Corey as buzziness Perry and Jeff Clover as Russian soldier Jim GL Asa businessman Charles Gonzalez as Nika businessman Frando Gonzalez Asa pedestriana David Gra pedestrian Robert Chrissy construction worker Paul GT Fish warehouse worker Bishana college student Lucky Harmona CIA agent Jesse Hawks Parker Danny Hand buzziness Aparian Josh Hillman construction worker Cisnyanary Hobbs details Zach Henry Cutrelani Luke's NYC pedestrian Rand Newton Jade attack Mark Saley's Atares Jerry Lee Vincent Chesa player the movie is produced by Richard Del Rio line producer from Cuba Vanna Diesel producer Matt Ilford Trill producer Finney Jansen line producer Cliff Landing a co-producer Amanda Leshekska producer Sharon Lubbs associate producer from Cuba Chris Morgan producer Neil Homores producer SMA Vinat executive producer music by Brian Taylor cinematography by Stephen F. Wincona editing by Paul Rappel Christianovka casting by Christopher G. Joffrey Akansa John Pepe production designed by Bill Parisiala direction by Andrew Mix John Ekars Dismamorpha Jabler Armis Bono and Brian STS set decoration by Daniela Berman costume design by Marlon Stewart Sanja Milivi makeup department launch and Dr. Hairstylist David L. hairstylist from Cuba Henza Angela hairstylist Charathi and Marka Rocks makeup artist De Jensen Early Miss Board hairstylist Cuba Utem Butler key makeup artist Amridnar hairstylist from Cuba Rock hairstylist from Cuba Roxy Laroa makeup artist Venda Diana D. Head Department Head Second Unit Chris Artist Makeup Artist Production Management Lajerson Additional Production Supervisor Frank C. Post Production Supervisor Bernapina Production Supervisor from Iceland Maggie Ingla Production Supervisor from New York Mela Foura Unit Production Manager and Hermanson Unit Production Manager Sharon Lubbs Production Supervisor from Cuba Mac Executive in charge of Fat Production Chris Mort Associate Production Manager John Aller Drawn Production Manager Jason Boom and Director of Fat Production IMX version Carla Regenora Production Manager Robin Ryu Assistancy Production Manager Dabby Sock Production Supervisor Froma Iceland Way Williams Unit Production Manager Second Jit Second Unit Structor Assistant Structor Kikari Bada Assistant Structure Scott David Brown Second Assistant Director Frank Per 38 First Assistant Director Jam Correr Fast Assistant Director Jonathan ACO Action Unit Director a 5th C Second Assistant Director Crisa Fleur Additional Second Assistant Director Vincent Granto Second The Assistant Director Halbert Hakim Second Assistant Director J. Abel James Additional Assistant Director Dixon McFlipsky Assistant Director Sapiro Rotos Second Unit Director Jeremy Zeki Assistant Director M. Race Second Assistant Director Pedro Ramro Satpon Ixatria First Assistant Director Alexander Eric Additional Assistant Director Breeza Stanford Second Assistant Director Aura Department David Albon Carpenter Clayona Edison Assessor Scott Edison Assistancy Property Master Steve Edison Construction for Men Family No More How Fast and Fur Wasted It's Perfect Stratoa Family Civil War The Fate of the Fausai Strato Family Civil War but it ended up wasting the Fast and Furious franchisee Best Storytelling Opportunity on a predictable blackmail storyline There's a case to be made that the Fast and the Furious series should have ended with the Furious 7 Furious 7 was retold into a tribute to Paul Walker when the actor sadly passed away during filming Thea. Final scene of Tom and Rhea, and having only a last street race before Brian takes an exit and leaves Tom behind would have been a perfect ending to this epic saga, but since Universal wanted to keep making money, it kept making Fast and the Furious movies. The Fate of the Furious faces as the highest chapter yet. The trailer shows Tom betraying his team, the people he clone family, forcing them to reluctantly fight back. This setup could have been the greatest Fast and the Furious story of all. The TR family civil war, like the Avengers Fallout and Captain America Civil War. It would have been a great way to test the characters' loyalty and bring some real drama to an action blockbuster, but the Civil War was oversold. The Fate of the Furious was marketed as the end of the family. The marketing for the Fate of the Furious is the end of Dom's family. The promise was set up as Dom's family being forced to fight him after he unexpectedly betrays them. The tagline "A Family No More" was used on some of the film's poster and the trailers left in a mysterious as to why Dom had suddenly turned on his team. It seemed as though there had been a huge falling out that caused Dom and his family to take sides, which was really exciting, but that's not quite how it played out in the action movie. The reason why Tom turned against his family made it less impactful. The reason why Tom turned against his family and the Fate of the Furious erased all the drama promised by the premise. As it turned out, he didn't want to turn on his team. He was being blackmailed by the terrorist named Cipher. There was no enemy between Dom and his team. It was all of our show, so Dom's long-standing loyalty, his family, was not tested, and team didn't have to fight him as much as they had to savvy him. This allowed the filmmakers to confer pad return to the status gain a time for the end credits. It would have been much more interesting if Dom had been put in a position where he actually had to choose to go against his team because of something he thought was the right thing. Black storyline was a totally cop-out. It was the most obvious answer for why Do had change of heart and turned against the people he loves. I'd allowed the filmmakers to have their cake and eat it too. They could have to turn against his team and fight them without having to really break up the family or take any risk with the narrative. I would have been much more interesting if Dom had been put in a position where he actually had to choose to go against his team because of something he thought was right. The Fate of the Furious was not really a trailer family civil war. The Fate of the Furious was not really the tractor family civil war that the marketing promised. The poster and trailer suggest the Fate of the Furious was going to be the Fast and the Furious version of Captain America Civil War. This agreement, like the eventual tablet over the Saki Accords, would break Dom's family apart and split them into two functions led by Dom and Hobbs, like Iron Man and Captain America. Dom and Hobbs would color their half of the group into battle against the other, and based on the blockbuster box office success that marketing campaign shelled it seemed as Tart and Fisk fans were excited to see the storyline play out. But the Feast of the Fisk was not really the Domia versus Hobbs movie that the marketing suggested it would be. It wasn't Dom's team versus Hobbs' team. It was everyone vs Dom until Dom escaped Cipher influence reaching their side. Hobbs' presence in their trailers was apparently just an attempt to cash his own dest. Since then, a thriving star power Captain America Civil War presented the Marvel Cinematic Universe with all new storytelling challenges and brought some compelling drama to a comic book movie universe that had previously played it. It led to the mind-blowing events of Avenger Infinity War and Avenger Endgame. The Fate of the Furious could have done the same for the Fast and Furious series, but Ida continued to play safe and failed to reach them goals. Parts of greatness. The Fast family fearing apart could have made for a great movie. Dom's family feeling apart could have been the ultimate Fast and the Furious story. Dom has been extremely loyal to his family and the other Fast and Furious characters since the beginning, so much so it's become a mummy, and family is the central theme of the entire series. There's nothing dramatic, it's just trying about the family staying happily bonded together for 10 movies in a row. Even when a member of Tom's family dies, they are usually revealed to be live a couple of movies later. It's much more dramatically engaging to take a happy family and push them to the edge and tee them against each other. The movies that have followed the Fate of the Furious F9 and Fasts have been massively overwhelming, and because they have failed to rise the stakes or shake Upon the formula in any significant way. The Fast and Fish franchise keeps doing more or less the same thing over and over again. Dee's family faces a new villain and they defeat the villain, and they have a barbu on the 9th or 10th go around. The formic approach started to become a painfully obvious FX and on a cliffhanger because it's still the same section and free family drama. If the fate of the Furious has followed through on the family Civil War storyline that is initially promised, then it would have set the series on a completely different trajectory. If the Fit and the Fist had to follow through on the Trio FS War storyline that it is initially promised, that it would set the series on a completely different trajectory, that it would have allowed the filmmaker to explore new ideas and storyline with the writing characters. The following movie could have built on that Civil War and continue to test the characters' loyalties and relationships with each other. But that would have been a creative risk, and most big budgets of franchise filmmaking it steadfastly risk awards the climatic tank scene in The Fast in The Fate of the 4 Years. So has military expert Nicholas is scratching his head. Released in 2017, the 8th installment in the ongoing Fast and Furious franchise is one of the more aroused as DC's by the saboteurs Cipher T's beloved family. The film feature all of the over-the-top action fans has came to expect from the franchise, including his climatic scene which involves vehicle driving on a glacier and tangents area redirecting Terraport with his bare hands in a new video from inside a military vehicle. Historian and armor officer Nekas Moore and rated various tank battle in a movie and television for realism. One of them was the fate of the Faust climatic tank scene on Aise, which had him literally scratching his head in complete and utter confusion. At the end generously rated the scene are 2 out of 10 in terms of realism. Read what said or watch the video here. Either rips a W. It was basically a track toy for people to drive around and looks just like it does in the movie here. It's so because it had such lightweight and such a high powered weight ratio. The thing is incredibly fast and incredibly nimbly, which of course attracts the attention of the military. Well, hang on a second, we have got the vehicle that can go anywhere really quickly. Can we do something with it? But the variant that the army has been looking at it is actually a robotic combat vehicle. I believe it's the RCVM and it's being plugged at the M5, and on the top, much like it's shown in the clip, it's a remote weapon station. He's driving in ice and those don't look like ice tracks, so believe it or not there's actually ways to you can get more grip on a track with a vehicle on ice. It's anything from snow chains, those used in World War II, to these days you can have grasser that have knocked out a few track pads and you put basically class into the tracks. The thing is can quite fast do it various man-wise and ice, and that's questionable in the context. I can't think of Ross as an expect of an ACC to a plot why attack would have a grappling hook attached to it. The Lambo at the point that the Connect is basically underwater and that provides more drool than the thinking hall. Well, there's your point of realism to came off. Instead of the limbo getting pulled out, I'm going to be generous. I'm going to give it 1 paw because it has tracked, and I'm going to give it 1 P because it pulled the door instead of the whole limbo. So I'm going to give it a 2. So Fast and Furious climatic scene is far from the only example of the franchise unrealistic action. F9 carry magic scene sparked more Tabito veridistic validity with Astropathion Whitehall and Ving to debunk the scene because it defies the basic laws of magism. Or a recently fast scene in which the monolittle PR leaps between 2 speeding a carrot was called out by everyone on linear for being over the top, unrealistic and defying the law of physics. While these types of scene have been called out and criticized relatively, the Fast and Furious franchise has gender favorite fantasy previously because of its extra and abstraction. Despite his 3 rating origin, the franchise has fully evolved into high-octane high standard international sponic that pushed the boundaries of believability. One of the keys to franchise success is self-awareness, and it's been at its best best of filmmaking like Justin Lin or Afin Thea Fate of the Force have fully embraced his and committed to Thea. So let's explain the ending of Thea movie The Fate of the Furious. The Fate of the Furious is the first film in a new triad known franchise. Star Vin Diesel and longtime writer Chris Morgana have been pointing out the exact verb in an interview over the last few weeks, making it clear that the events of Fate will pay off in the 9th and 10th film. So now that we have all had a chance to see the movie, at least judging by those box office return, let's take a look at the end of the Fate and what it sets up for the Furious films to come. Fate of the Furious is the first franchise installment after the tragic and ultimately death of Paul Walker, who spent a decade playing Brian O'Connor. The ismein-worthy heart and moral compass of the franchise, who traded in his Cambodia for a life of among the outlaws, with how at the core of Brian's story his remains with the Toretto sibling and the corresponding real-life chemistry between Voder and Diesel. F Street and inversion of the franchise format by making Dom Trpa the Furious P family's turn against his own family to an aside to the Charlize Theron cyberterrorist. So if you need a quick refresher, Cipher finds Street in Cuba on his honeymoon with Lie, where he sources him to betray his beloved family in order to save a son he didn't know he had. Turns out Ivina got pregnant sometime between a Fast 5 and Furious 6, but she realized it just as Tom learned Letty was still alive, so she kept the news to herself, with the plan to tell him after he got her back from his honeymoon. And so we meet at the little chubby cheek without a name, with is a super Sophie narrative movie, but also one of only justification that it would seal Tom's stand against his family. In the process we also learned that a Cipher is the ultimate big bait of the franchise, not just because she is deadly cold. Cipher has Elena shot in the head just because D was not willing to put down his own wife. She's also short of thus to the Fast and Fouts. Turns out a Cipher has been pulling the strings all along. She employs multiple terrorists including Furious 7, even Jandy and Hanso the mercenary who kidnapped Rama for the Gildayanoma Lukives the 406 buddy hooped the Imans against Hera family in an attempt to a deadly tech device to the highest spider. The fact that Ana was a Cipher sphere role is important for a couple reasons. One, he was the boss of Purga, the Dr. Law will settle at his execution in Fast and the Furious, but more importantly it was Ana defeat in Furious 6 that draw the attention of its bigger better brother Tia Jam, the assassins who terrorized the family in Thea Fuan. Here's where Fate of the Furiana runs into a narrative snake that has some fans fell furious. If you recall, Orang has left in critical condition after Fiasic's infamous never-landing Tarek battle, leading his seriously pissed off ex-special forces brother to the family doorstep, where he tried to kill them all, which is where things get tricky because Fate of Thea Faust P some serious running of audience manipulation to make Descartes a new member of the family. Just one film later, fair soften up the show boys a beater by introducing us to their mother Helen and Ren, who context while he is under sire th with the deal of our son's rescue. His baby Dom will let the Shaw boy go free and in the process give them a shot getting revenge. The women who tore the Shaw family apart. Turns out Cipher tried to recruit here first, and when he said no he went after his little brother. I also turned out that there was never a British military hero before his government turned on him, leveling him out a terrorist, something along the line of what happens to Dan Johnson's hopes at the beginning of the Fate. In fact, his own death with a little help from Fast 5 Vila and Santos Strix. Cipher's plan v Dom's a familiar cross necklace and rock RS and all born with on in tow, where the do taking out hard man and rescue the baby Thea get their hero moment. Sire escape as a Stam get the best piece in the movie, and after starting up aggressive with the Hobbs, it seems Deads get a spot at the family table, maybe one of the spots where Hand and Gassel choose to sit. That's a big flaw in the Fate of the Furious scripts. It ignores the fundamental tear that the entire franchise is built on. Family Adar didn't just come at the family, he executed a beloved character song Kahani in Cool Blood. His death has been shown in the 3 Furious films. It's a central event that caused the entire franchise to bear the shift timeline just to keep the Chirac Turn around. A Fast of the Furious not only act like it never happened, it invites the murderer to a seat at the table. Well, at least the new table, since he blew the old one up. Strangely, the fact that the kill and aise getting most of the play right now. However, it's equally important to note that he tried to blow up not one but two pregnant women. Were carrying the top line, no less. Maya was crying her son child with BR at the time and almost went up in flames when the dart bombed the old TR home, and Elena, who would have been pregnant with Tom's son at the time, was bombed out of a four-story window. When her trigger Hobbs officer, he can say that he didn't did it all for the family. The scared flows on but straight of the Dasha we were introduced into a Furious S was a monster, and fate of the Furious doesn't to come close to observing him. However, fate of the F does make it very clear that here is a part of the team, and now not just because Mr. Nobody says so, but because he has earned a nice golden corona and a seat at the table. Likewise, Ian is still in play along with their cheeky mom, who Morgan have said he wants to give more to do in future films. What does all this mean for the future? Well, there's a few things to look at for only the signs are pointing to a possible new chapter in the Han saga, at least out a while, in adding that Han is never mentioned. It's also impossible to believe that Chris Morgan, who has overstretched the entire Furious narrative since Toy Drift, the film that it introduced Han in the first place, just to forgot about him. Morgan has to interview that we don't know Shaw's full of story and considering this franchise track record that restructuring characters is possible, that fate is laying the groundwork for a reel that will fully absolve Shaw of his sins. Expect the holy exploding bring it one thing if Cena survived that runway. I like to think he'll could have to. I like to think that she and Han are pulling at Ryan and Mia on the beach somewhere worth more cert. Ain't that Cipher will be definitely back, and Deboshi's going to be pissed. Cipher kidnapped Tom's kid and turned his life upside down, mostly just because he pissed Hera off too many times and he didn't even know she existed when he took down her other crew. This time Dom not only poppy that her organization that he killed Hera red-head boyfriend sent the Shasa brother after her and destroyed Hera. Nuke's Fate of the F didn't just introduce another disposable villain to be tapped in the next film, is established a probably astrologist that can carry the family thought the rest of the trilogy. Then there's the M of Hobbs and the Fast 5. John has become a critical opponent of the Fast and Furious charm. Adding Stum to the mix only makes it more obvious, as the two have fantastic screen chemistry and their beefy rivalry turned men are much more neatos of the testosterone drenched male bonding that has defined the franchise to the armor or a force line of a filmmaker and cast a member over the years. In truth, John Shabila, adding these films now. However, at the end of the Fate Hobbs the turn down, Mr. Nobody offered to be re-estimated, opting to stay home with his daughter. There are also rumors that Vin Diesel showed down an ending scene that focused on Hobbs and Shaw, reporting a continue of the well-documented beef between Diesel and Johnson. It's unlikely that H's decision to retire will keep him out of the franchise for long. The constraint Jason's star power and box office appeal, but Diesel is a creative force on the franchise, so how that conflict the manifest in the narrative of it all remains to be seen. Finally, there's the matter of the baby. He is adorable and expect hella stay that way. Dom named him Brian in a loving nod to Paul Walker. Of course he did Family Forever. What do you guys think of the ending? Can you buy into the good guy is if strong and not feeling to carry two more films? Should a shops be the man now? Sound off in the comments. It was the cast that launched one. Tweets in the trailer of the fight of the Faust vs STR lock slip switch at Charlize Theron's body suffer in front of his wife Letty. How Wyatt are for back Tom and Toa working for her by threatening to kill the son he never knew he had. So how did Tom get out of this point? By teaming up with his nemesis and using a very special necklace. Confused? Let us explain. Where were Dom and Alan together? We backed in the fourth Fast FF and the Furious. Dom's childhood sweetheart Lady appeared to die in a car explosion in a Fast 5. Tom moved down in Remar Brazilian Topolina, and the two were living a peaceful explosion-free life together in Spain at the beginning of Fast and the Furious 6. But diplomatic security service DSS agent Luke Hobbs had out in The Rock Johnson take them down and told them that Letty was still alive. She apparently lost her memory and joined a group of terrorists led by an Elena. Being an incredibly understanding person, eventually tells sister to go save Letty, which he does. Hotel Street in feet of tea. A furious dad. He sounds out she was pregnant right before Roulette turn. That means she probably knows she was pregnant at the end of the F and the Faust 6 and the Faust 7. Reen appeared twice during those films, first at the end of the First and Furious 6 when she tells Letty no hard feelings, she can have you. She's back in the beginning of F, so when Shaw's brother the Shaw attacks the headquarters, Dears blows up Cipher and Hobbs save Ellen by grabbing her. Also they are launched out of the window. That means that Elena was pregnant when she flew out of the building and landed in a car, which could not have been great for the baby. Ellen says she planned on not telling him about the baby after he and the Letty got back from the honeymoon in Cuba. Seems odd since the baby looks to be well over a year old when he finally see him. Also she has not named him for an entire year again, not to mention in prequel they were the Russian nestling adores a villain that worked backwards, says multiple, including Janda from F7 and O, now from F and F6 on her payroll. She was also the boss of the drug lord Oda, the man who ordered El to be killed in a Fast and Faust, and it was On's deaths at the lead dear to RH on the crew and fun. So basically Cipher is a SP for a lot of the bad things that have happened to the Fast family in the last 5 films. If you had any doubt that she is really bought, she kills Arena just because Dom was flirting with his own wife. Talk about a cool, so Dom calls on another family to help the Shaw's family doesn't love a Cipher. She reground shot to her team and then left him for dead in hospital when Tom threw him off a plan in F and Fury 6. Dom figures this out after Cipher tells the attacker he chose the wrong team, which he breaks into the crew super secret headquarters and gives them all the confusions. Dom somehow managed to reach out to the Shaw's brother, mothers and the Marine, who we hope will get behind the wheel of the car in Fast and Furious 9. He then pretends to kill a Shaw's mother is waiting for him in the ambulance to devise a plan to take down a Cipher and save Tom's baby, while Dom is busy stealing nukes in Russia. While it's great that Ananda saved Tom's baby, let's not forget that the brother area responsible for the death of Dom's the friends GLD and Han in Fast and Furious 6. In fact, the plot of Furious 7 even center around the gang tracked around Idir to kill him and avenge H's death. Considering all the trouble when he went in the last movie, Dom seems to forget all of that pretty quickly when he decided to team up with the SHA brothers this time around. So how did Idir fake his death? Leah and Santos are 2 members of Tom's group from Fast and Furious and Fast 5. They pick her while they require jobs like clogging up the toilets in a police station so they can march as janitors to infiltrate. At the end of the fate of the F years we see them gambling theory millions in Monaco. They were not in the last Fast films but returned for a brief scene at the Fast as 2. Ambulance tries who movie and as D. The body half is dared able to track a Cipher's a plan. If that cross necklace looked familiar, it's because it's been kicking her around the F franchise for years. Dama gave it to the Letty because she died and started wearing it again in her memory. It fell off during a fight in Fast 5 and Davina picked it up and started wearing it around, which it sh up while Toma got it back from her and gave it to Lia to try to help her again her memory in a Fast and Furious 6. She in turn gave it to Anja to prove she didn't care about it. Tom Lottersha dropped it at this idea of Hans Murna sh of threat to Dom. Dom retires when he visit Tokyo to bring a Hans party home. So and now besides sentimental values apparently has a super powerful tracking device implanted inside these. A clever move let sh to Tom's location is setting up the delightful scene in which he kicks bad guys bats while carrying a baby. Dominic Tr and Leslie are enjoying their honeymoon in Cuba when Thea noticed his cousin getting into trouble with Fernando, For not being able to pay off his debt, Dom encouraged friend Toa keep it about the cars and decided to race him for the car. He breaks down his the cousin and Rue car to make it more efficient and managed to win the heat of the race by a very narrow margin. Fernando gave the car to Dom out of fairness, but Dom decided to let Fernando keep it and claim that his respect is good enough. He hands over his own car to his cousin and goes his own way when he comes across the cyber-terrorist Sayer, who lets him by asking him to help her fix her car and eventually persuade him to work for her. She also forces him to keep it secret by threatening him about losing his team. She sends him on a mission to retrieve an EMP device which went missing from Thea Gulf and ended up in Berlin with arms dealer from the liberation from Thea's device has the power to wipe out an entire electrical crate. Dom runs into Hobbs at a football match where Hobbs tried to persuade him to deliver the EMP device to him. He gets together with his team and inform them of the mission. Upon reaching Berlin, Dom creates a diversion of the team, steal the EMP, drop a bomb and split. On the way to Hobbs, Dom decided to take another row and deliver the device to Cipher. Instead, Hobbs got arrested. In the process, he comes across TSH as it turns out to be the same person Hobbs helped place SH and restrained by Thea to engage in a very heated arguments and threaten each other. Soon the area both built out and recruited by Nobody, an intelligence officer, and a little nobody. The team is furious about the choices made by Tom and decide to work together under the leadership of Nobody to capture Tom and Cipher. Willie seizing Dagger mentioned Cipher and Rue a previous attempt to steal important devices in which he also involved Unshadir and Rue brother. The team learned that Cipher and Dom are trying to steal a Ramsey and a software and they are already attempting to theft by on. They tracked them down and managed to get hold of them. As soon as they steal the device and the chaos, Sarah read that she had hold Dom's son ex-lover and which Dom was previously unaware of. Hosty to ensure the Dom only worked for Cipher. Lena ex-lover meets Dom with Thea's son and informs him that she would like Dom to keep his first name since she had already decided to keep his middle name. Mark assured of his loyalty. Cipher Sandister on another mission where he managed to escape for a short while to meet Sha and his mother and ask her for help. The team continued to try to capture Tom. Also, he steals a nuclear football on his most recent mission. When they try to attack him, he skips and shoots and apparently killed in the process, adding to the chaos. Cipher tried to help Tom by hiking all the cars in the city and putting them into auto drive with the team chasing him, and Cipher enforces close to the scene. An enforcer Canner tries to kill Lie, but Tom saves her to take a revenge. Cipher then gets Lena killed in front of Tom. Cipher sends her to Russia to use the EMP device, which is still law with her to hijack a submarine which will help Cipher cause a nuclear war. Meanwhile, the team is taken to a mobile showroom by Patty where they are provided with modified car to catch up at and capture Dom simultaneously. Duo pretended to be from accord with the old members of Dom and team and recruits his son. The update Dom that his son is safe and no longer is forced to be loyal to Sir, so he goes on to kill Rods on stretch. Cipher releases a missile to kill Tom, but the entire team manages to rocket and the missile landed on the submarine. Instead, the team helps save Tom and Deard goes to confront Cipher on the plan where he CHS out to invite him. After the series of image, Dom and his team are in front that Cipher has not backed down and Hobbs earned his job back. However, he turned it down because he wanted to be a better father and be with his daughter Dee, and Tom make up and celebrates as Tom decided that the first name of his son would be Brian. The movie story begins with Thea's life of Dominic Toretto upon Thea's screen as we see him living up in Cuba with his life most improbing around the thing he loved most, cars. It doesn't take long for a street race to unfold as a duo between Dom and Thea first to star in all Havana takes across the beauty of the city and ending in another but a massive explosion from the Vigo. The film does not span in a setting out any expectation going forward a track forward as we catch up with Hobbs John, who is understandably one of the comedy aspects of the film. Cashing his daughter Sayer team Toa cleverly incorporates Thea as a fear testing against the opposite team. He is enlisted to collect a device from a source, and Binning needs the help of Thea gang including Doom, who is at this Mana exchange card and Gondra. The film provides you with an area of emotion, mostly alter and embracement during some of the most ridiculous part of the movie. There is a scene involving a BB-inch Madeira with springs. To a mind but one of the most surprising factor with the film is Chile portrayal for Scylla and Cipher. When we are first introduced to a character I could not quite take her seriously, mainly because of the deadlock and her little girl. Later, as soon as she drops act and we find out that she is more of an addictive, our true form appears and our dragging psychopath reveal itself. Each good vein must have a gadgets, a cool wardrobe and a convening, but above all his case Cipher has Rose played by Christopher Huofa. Games of Thrones Cipher is the main driving force of the tension throughout the movie, as she always seems to be a step ahead of the gang and makes good use of Tom whenever she can manipulate the furious California at every single into giving up the game. Fast and Furious sees the return of regular collector including Tag Liar Ramsey and Raymond, to name a few. It's a great fun to watch how these character bores of only another, and particularly how Terry a character act with the rest of the trope. He remains a wacky vice cracking only a liner us you may be in for the Carsa but will go running for a hill on see someone begins owing mile to man. He's not wrong. We also see the return Mr. Nobody, the leader of the Carta Upsteam, which is newest, called Literally Nobody, or Eric Reiner. The introduction of the Mr. Nobody character almost has an Avenger wit with some similarities that can be seen between his character and Nick Fury's, particularly when he uses a variety of ways and means to gather the gang together. Throughout the movie we still see and he reference to Brando and Poe Walker, an ex-member of the team who passes away in real life. In 2013 he played such a huge part in the Fast and Fish franchise, and it's neat to see that the series continue to honor his work wherever they can, particularly toward the end of the movie as Tom honor his legacy the best way that he can. In my opinion, the Fast and Furious is an action-packed high-energy NC fist which I believe a lot of people will enjoy and will do incredibly well at the box office, as previous installment have. If you have the intention that you will come away from the movie having to answer all the question of life, you would be better of watching something else. Do you need a Fast and Furious franchise recap? Because maybe like me you have yet to see one of them of the franchise. I might be the mini reboot and maybe you missed one, or you need a refresher to. If so, then let my search benefit you with a quick movie recap. I watched screening of the new Fast X movie earlier this week and was a little bit ill prepared. Fast X is part of the Fast and Furious franchise, known for its action-packed car racing and high storylines. While each film is mostly a self-contained, having some knowledge of the previous movies can enhance your experience. The Fast and F franchise has become one of the most popular and successful action movie series of all time. It has big screen-worthy car chases, a high street high, and a diverse cast of characters, and along the way it has captured the hearts of audiences worldwide, making his franchise unique and appealing. Fast and Furious franchise has engendered a massive and dedicated fan base since his first arrived in theater in 2001. The key elements of his appeal have always been consistent: lots of action scenes and racing, and stacks a connable cast of characters, and the ongoing theme of family and loyalty. The Fast and Furious 2001, first a movie of The Fast and the Furious 2001. This is the first film in the franchise and introduces us to the main characters, Dominic Toretto and Brian O'Connor. The story follows Brian, an undercover police officer who infiltrates a group of street racers suspected of hijacking trucks. He befriends the group's leader, Dominic, and becomes deeply immersed in the world of illegal street racing. Brian's loyalty is tested as he finds himself caught between his duty as a police officer and his growing friendship with Dominic. The crew includes Dominic's sister Mia and friends such as Letty, along with other important characters like Vince, Jesse, and Johnny Tran, who all play significant roles in the story. The Fast and the Furious introduces many of the core elements that define the franchise, including fast cars, thrilling action, street racing, and a strong focus on the bond between its characters. It remains a must-watch for fans who want to experience the origins of the series. Too Fast, Too Furious, 2003. The second film takes place after the events of the first movie and follows Brian as he finds himself on the run from the law in Miami. To clear his name, he teams up with his childhood friend Roman Pierce. Roman is a charismatic street racer and skilled driver, and together they agree to work with U.S. Customs to take down a dangerous drug lord named Carter. Dominic Toretto does not appear in this film. Instead, the movie introduces new characters such as Monica Fuentes, an undercover agent working with Brian, and Tej Parker, a skilled mechanic and hustler who later becomes an important part of the Fast Furious family. Although the absence of Dominic and some of the original crew members may be noticeable, Too Fast, Too Furious maintains the franchise's focus on high-speed action, street racing, and teamwork while laying the groundwork for the series' continued success. The Fast and the Furious, Tokyo Drift, 2006. The third film in the franchise takes place chronologically later in the series and introduces a new protagonist, a high school student named Sean Boswell. After getting into trouble because of his reckless behavior and involvement in street racing in the United States, Sean is sent to live in Tokyo with his father. In Tokyo, Sean becomes immersed in the underground world of drift racing, a style of racing that requires precise control, slides, and advanced driving techniques. He befriends Han, a skilled and laid-back racer who teaches him the art of drifting. Sean soon finds himself caught in a rivalry with the local drift king, Dwayne, also known as DK. The movie also features a brief appearance by Dominic Toretto, helping establish its place within the broader Fast Furious timeline. Although several main characters from the previous films are absent, Tokyo Drift offers a unique and exciting chapter in the franchise. It places a greater emphasis on drift racing while continuing the series' tradition of thrilling action, fast cars, and memorable characters.